Freedom has been lost to envy. The income distribution in the U.S. is so skewed that the rich are found in the top 1%. The truly rich, with the accoutrements associated with that class, are in the top half 1%. Those points were lost on those Americans who regard anyone slightly better off than themselves as rich. A slightly bigger house in a better neighborhood, a BMW instead of a Toyota, and the ability to go on vacation without going into debt is all it takes to be rich in the minds of those whose eyes are green with envy. Americans no longer know what freedom is. Historically, the definition of a free person is one who owns his own labor. Serfs and slaves were not free because they do not own all of their own labor. Today in America, government has a claim on every person's labor, just as feudal lords, the government of that time, had claims on the labor of serfs and 19th century plantation owners had on slaves. Understanding that an income tax was serfdom, our founding fathers wrote the U.S. Constitution in a way that prevented an income tax. This was altered in 1913 with a constitutional amendment that some claim was not properly carried out. The first step in the encirclement of the American people was taken in envy. The rich were the targets of the income tax. Once in place, the income tax was extended by law and by inflation until ordinary people were being taxed at rates several times as high as the original top rate for the rich. After almost 100 years of income tax, generations have been born into serfdom and accept the government's claim on their labor as normal. Some say they don't mind paying taxes to help the poor. They should look to see what share actually goes to the poor and what share goes to war, armaments, and the bailout of the Treasury Secretary's rich friends. The problem with a tax on a person's labor is that it subtracts from a person's independence. Without independence, it is difficult to exercise constitutionally protected rights, such as free speech. In former times, family farms and businesses provided a measure of independence for many Americans. Today, most work for wages and salaries. The only real avenue to independence is to save part of one's earnings and acquire enough wealth to live on. For most of us Americans, the government's claim on our labor makes this impossible. This is even more the case when government fails in its regulatory responsibilities and allows banksters to join in the plunder of the hard-pressed citizens. In the past, great wealth accumulations found their way into endowments of private universities, museums, and public libraries. Institutions that also contributed to the independence of citizens from government control. Today, even private universities and tenured faculty have lost pieces of their independence. There are subjects that cannot be investigated and opinions that cannot be expressed. We can rationalize the inhibitions by saying that they are proper subjects for censorship. However, once the process of suppressing thought and speech begins, it spreads like wildfire. The Tax Foundation has calculated that Tax Freedom Day arrives on May 29th this year if the federal government's budget deficit is included, as it should be, in the tax burden. This means that Americans work 42% of the year for the government, a higher tax rate that was endured by medieval serfs and one approaching that of the 19th century slave. In the 19th century, there were underground railways that slaves could use to escape to freedom. In our time, underground railways are known as tax havens. Just as slave owners sought to abolish underground railways, our owners today seek to outlaw tax havens. And some Americans will reject these analogies. They contest the validity of these analogies by refusing the government's claim on their labor. Perhaps the best evidence of American serfdom is that most Americans do not even have the ability to test the validity of the analogy, because the government takes its share in withholding tax before wages and salaries are paid to us serfs. And as always, you guys take care of each other out there.